On the Italian peninsula, where the Apennine Mountains descend toward the coast, the Tiber River cuts through the landscape like a vein of fortune. Here, on 7 hills, Rome began, not as an empire, not as a city, but as an accident of geography made inevitable by human ambition. The hills offered what was essential: elevation for defense. The river provided what was vital: trade and water. The surrounding plains gave what was necessary: agriculture. But geography alone does not birth civilizations. Something else was required: the will to build, the hunger to dominate, the belief that this place, this intersection of hills and water, was destined to become the center of all things. In the 8th century before Christ, Latin-speaking peoples occupied these hills. They were not sophisticated. They were not urban. They were herders and farmers, indistinguishable from 100 other tribal groups scattered across Italy. Yet something changed. The mixture of populations, Latins, Etruscans, Sabines, created friction. Friction created need. Need created system. System created power. By the 7th century, Rome was not merely a settlement. It was becoming a city. It was beginning to understand what it could become. In 509 BCE, the monarchy ended. A king named Tarquinius Superbus ruled with such contempt that the Romans rebelled. They did something revolutionary. They created a system designed to prevent any single man from holding absolute power ever again. This was the Republic. Not democracy, never democracy, but republicanism. A structure where power rotated, where the wealthy few governed through checks and balances, and the many watched from below. The Senate became Rome's backbone. 300 patricians gathered to legislate, to deliberate, to control the machinery of state. But the plebeians, the common people, demanded inclusion. For 2 centuries, Rome was locked in internal struggle. The patricians resisted. The plebeians pushed. Slowly, rights were extracted: the right to vote, the right to hold office, the right to protection under law. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome had become something unprecedented, a state held together not by kingship, but by institutional structure. A machine that could absorb new peoples, new territories, and convert them into participants in an expanding empire. The Republic created hierarchy. It created order. It created the possibility of infinite growth. You cannot build an empire with ideas alone. You require tools. Rome's tool was the legion, not the rabble armies of neighbor states, not conscripted peasants fighting out of obligation. The Roman legion was something different, a machine of war built on discipline, on repetition, on the systematic breaking of individual will into collective purpose. Each legion contained approximately 5,000 men, divided into smaller units called centuries, manipuli, and cohorts. Every soldier was trained identically. Every movement was drilled into muscle memory. When a Roman soldier advanced, he did not advance as an individual, but as a cell in an organism. He did not think. He acted. Unlike the rigid Greek phalanx, the manipuli allowed flexibility, reorganization, adaptation. Roman legions could break apart and reform. They could adjust to terrain. They could adjust to enemy tactics. When enemies fought Rome, they fought a self-correcting organism that learned and adapted in real time. Moreover, Rome professionalized the military. Soldiers served for years. They were paid. They were equipped at state expense. They became not farmers who fought seasonally, but fighters who made war their entire existence. When Rome conquered a territory, it garrisoned it with soldiers who would remain for decades. Empires before Rome had defeated enemies. Rome alone could hold conquered lands through permanent, professional occupation. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome controlled Italy. But across the Mediterranean lay Carthage, a merchant empire, wealthy beyond measure, with naval power unmatched. Rome and Carthage were on a collision course written by geography and ambition. The First Punic War lasted 23 years. Rome learned a terrible lesson: sea power. Carthage ruled the waves. Rome's legions were formidable on land, but helpless at sea. So Rome did what Rome always did when facing a problem. It systematized a solution. It built a navy. Not a powerful navy, merely an adequate one. But adequate navies, when piloted by disciplined soldiers, could defeat superior ones. Rome adapted. Rome learned. Rome conquered. By 241 BCE, Carthage surrendered Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica to Roman rule. But the wound festered. In 218 BCE, a Carthaginian general named Hannibal crossed the Alps with 50,000 soldiers and war elephants. For 15 years, Hannibal devastated Italy. At Cannae in 216 BCE, he killed nearly 50,000 Romans in a single day, one of the greatest military victories in history. Rome stood on the edge of annihilation, but Rome did not surrender. It ceased fighting Hannibal directly. Roman generals waged war on Carthage's allies, slowly starving the elephant general of resources and support. It was not glorious. It was not swift, but it was systematic. It was patient. It was Roman. In 202 BCE, Scipio defeated Hannibal at Zama. Carthage was finished. Rome was the master of the Mediterranean world. With Carthage destroyed, Rome's expansion became a flood. Greece fell. Egypt fell. Syria fell. Gaul fell. By 100 BCE, Rome controlled not merely the Mediterranean, but the entire orbit around it. Legions marched in every direction, and the territories they conquered were folded into the Roman system. But conquest brings a problem that no ancient state had fully solved before Rome. How do you hold an empire? Rome's answer was systematic. It established provinces. It appointed governors. It built roads. It built garrisons. It built cities. It imposed law. It imposed taxes. The machinery was relentless, yet Rome's expansion came at a cost that was not merely military. Conquest meant slaves, hundreds of thousands of them. The small peasant farms that had built the Republic disappeared. Wealthy landowners consolidated territory into massive estates called latifundia, worked by slave labor, men, women, and children captured in distant wars and marched back to Italy in chains. By the 1st century BCE, Rome's economy was built on slavery. Mines, plantations, workshops, homes, all depended on enslaved labor. Rome's magnificence rested on a base of human suffering. The wealth that built Rome's temples and aqueducts was extracted through coercion, through violence, through the complete negation of human freedom. This was civilization's dark bargain. The machinery of the Republic was designed for a city-state, not an empire. It fractured. Wealth concentrated. The gaps between rich and poor widened into chasms. In 133 BCE, a tribune named Tiberius Gracchus proposed redistributing land to the poor. The Senate had him murdered. His brother Gaius attempted reform again. He too was killed. These murders revealed that the Republic's rules were fragile, that the wealthy would kill to preserve their power. A precedent was set. Violence could settle political disputes. For the next century, Rome tore itself apart. Civil wars erupted. Armies marched on the capital. Generals seized dictatorial power. The Republic was a corpse, though it did not yet know it. In 49 BCE, a general named Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon with his legions. Caesar had conquered Gaul. killing an estimated 1 million people. The Senate demanded he disband his army. Caesar refused. He marched toward Rome. Civil war erupted. Caesar's legions crushed his opponents. He became dictator. He reformed laws. He extended citizenship. Then, in 44 BCE, senators who feared his power murdered him. They believed they were saving the Republic. They were wrong. Caesar's death did not save the Republic. It triggered another round of civil wars. His adopted heir, a young man named Octavian, maneuvered brilliantly through the chaos. He defeated all rivals. By 27 BCE, he stood alone at the apex of Roman power. He claimed to have restored the Republic. He renamed himself Augustus. But everyone understood the truth. The Republic was dead. The age of emperors had begun. Augustus was calculated and careful. He retained the forms of the Republic while stripping it of power. The Senate continued to exist, but Augustus controlled the legions. When he spoke, the Senate listened. It was a dictatorship that wore a republic's clothes. What mattered was that the civil wars ended. What mattered was that for the first time in a generation, Romans could sleep without fear. He reduced the legions to 28, a sustainable force. He reformed administration, creating a bureaucracy that could manage an empire whether the emperor was wise or foolish. The Pax Romana began. It would last 2 centuries. Rome's golden age was not the Republic's age of expansion. It was the empire's age of consolidation. Walk through Rome in the 2nd century CE, and you move through a landscape of human achievement. The Colosseum rises from the earth, a structure that could hold 50,000 people, designed not for warfare, but for spectacle, for entertainment, for the demonstration of Rome's power over nature and physics. It was unnecessary. It was magnificent. The aqueducts carry water across impossible distances. From the mountains to the city, stone channels march forward, gravity doing the work that no pump could do. By the 2nd century, Rome had 11 major aqueducts, bringing 300 million gallons of water daily. The roads, a network of 250,000 miles of them, radiating from Rome like veins from a heart. A soldier could march from Rome to Britain in weeks. A merchant could move goods from Egypt to Gaul without fear. The roads made the empire possible. The cities that Rome built, Alexandria, Antioch, Carthage rebuilt, planned urban centers with forums and theaters and bathhouses. An empire needed not just control, but legitimacy. Rome provided both. This was Rome's genius in maturity, the transformation of power into permanence, making subjugation feel like civilization, making the empire feel inevitable. But empires are not eternal. By the 3rd century CE, the Pax Romana dissolved. Germanic tribes pressed against the northern frontier, Goths, Franks, Vandals. Inflation ravaged the economy. The silver content in Roman coins fell to 5%. In 50 years, Rome had 30 emperors. Most lasted months before being murdered. Around 250 CE, a plague swept through the empire, possibly measles, possibly smallpox. For 15 years, it ravaged the population. Cities emptied. Soldiers deserted their posts. Labor disappeared. Production halted. The mortality rate in some provinces reached 25%. Rome had conquered death in other ways, through sanitation, through public health. But it could not conquer this plague. The empire began to fray. By 395 CE, the empire could no longer be ruled as a single unit. An emperor named Theodosius divided it between his sons. The Western Roman Empire would govern from Rome. The Eastern Roman Empire, which would survive another 1,000 years as Byzantium, would rule from Constantinople. The split was supposed to be temporary. It became permanent. The Western Empire was in collapse. The tax base shrank. The army could no longer defend the frontiers. Barbarian tribes were no longer merely raiding. They were settling. In 410 CE, the Visigoths under Alaric sacked Rome itself. For 800 years, Rome had not fallen. The shock was profound. In 455 CE, the Vandals did worse, actually destroying portions of the city. By 476 CE, there were no more emperors in Rome. A Germanic chieftain named Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus. He sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople. The Western Roman Empire had ended not with a great battle, but with bureaucratic obsolescence. One day, Rome ruled the West. The next day, it did not. A millennium of history closed. Rome fell, but Rome did not disappear. The roads remained. The cities remained. The laws remained. Latin transformed into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese. Christianity spread throughout former Roman territories using the infrastructure Rome had built. The Church became Rome's heir, preserving Latin texts, maintaining learning, and helping rebuild European civilization after Rome's collapse. Rome taught the world that empires are built on system, on law, on infrastructure. Rome conquered enemies. Rome converted them into subjects, subjects into citizens. But Rome also taught a darker lesson, that such systems require oppression. Rome's roads were built by slaves. Rome's prosperity was purchased in human suffering. Civilization is not the opposite of barbarism. It is merely a more sophisticated system of control. Rome understood this perfectly. Rome rose. Rome fell. And the world would never be the same.